and welcome to the Matt and Steve Show. My name is Steve Schnee, and I'll be your co-host for this exciting episode featuring our very special guests, the Midnight Callers. Now, this power pop combo seemingly came out of nowhere with their fab debut album, Red Letter Glow, which was released on JEM Records in 2020. Filled with great hooks, harmonies, and a massive wall of guitars, Red Letter Glow was certainly one of the best albums of 2020 and one of the most impressive debut albums in many years. However, the band has upped the ante with the release of the even better Rattled Humming Heart, which time travels back to an era when glam stomps and power pop hooks lived together in harmony, and rock bands spent time crafting an album of singles instead of a single surrounded by a bunch of mediocre album tracks. Rattled Humming Heart is the real deal, a flashback to the past and a leap forward to the future. But before we introduce the band, I'd like to hand the reins over to the man, the myth, the legend. He's often called the 45th Beatle, and he's an ace purveyor of power pop. He lays claim to the first name in the title of the show. Yes, I'm talking about my brother in music, Mr. Matthew Street. Greetings, Matt.
Oh, Steve, thank you. Thank you so much. You're always so kind to me. You are not only my rock and roll brother, you are my power pop paramour, my friend. You lay it all out for me. And I'm so glad you're here, Steve. I would not want to do this with anyone else but you, because we have some special guests tonight, folks. From the band, as Steve said, they're based out of New York City, the Midnight Callers. And we have 4 members in the band. You have Chris Payne, guitar and vocals. You have Martin Stubbs, guitar and vocals. You have Marley Marianthopoulos, bass and vocals, and drummer Julian Bedrino, drums and vocals. And we are pleased to have 3 members of this great band here tonight to talk with us about their brand new album, as Steve mentioned, Rattled Humming Heart, due out June 23rd on JEM Records. Folks, please welcome from the Midnight Callers, we have Chris Payne. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Martin Stubbs. Hello, Martin. And Marley Marianthopoulos. Hey. Hello, guys. How y'all doing tonight?
Hey.
Welcome to the Matt and Steve Show. So happy to have you here. Now, before we go forward and talk a little bit about Rattled Humming Heart, let's go back for a minute, okay? In 2020, your debut album on JEM Records, Red Letter Glow, it was released to much acclaim. Now, Steve and I absolutely, as Steve mentioned earlier, we love the mixture of today's modern rock sounds with that classic power pop, garage rock, and new wave sound on that first album. And it made a lot of year-end top 10 lists back in 2020. For me, it was #1, and I know for Steve, it was right up there as well. Now, the single 41 Miles to Roscoe was selected by little Steven Van Zandt himself to be coolest song in the world that year on his underground garage station on Sirius XM. And it was later selected by the listeners as the #3 song of the year 2020 on little Steven's underground garage. Now, to this day, he's still playing 4 or 5 tracks from that album, and you can hear them on a regular basis. So real quick, before we get into the new album, one of you or more of you can take this question. What were your expectations for Red Letter Glow initially, and were you surprised by how well it was received?
I guess I'll take that. Expectations for Red Letter Glow, I mean, they weren't crazy high. I think really it was just that, and Martin could correct me, I feel like we had a conversation just more like, we need to record an album so we have something to hawk at gigs more than anything. And, we wanted to keep it cheap. So, we recorded it in my parents' living room for the most part, and then brought in Kurt Ryle, and then just to add the polish to it and add the professionalism to it that we thought it needed to kind of stand out a bit, and just put out a good product that people would like and, be into. But, in terms of, thinking that it was going to, introduce us to Marty Scott and get us signed the JEM, or, do what it did in terms of Little Stevens or anything like that, that's way beyond at least what I was thinking was going to happen with that album for sure.
Right. No, I mean the hooks, the driving beats on it, the melodies, the harmonies, the energy of that entire album, they're just readily apparent upon first listen. And here you are now, almost 2.5 years later, you're back with your highly anticipated second album for JEM Records. A lot of people have been looking forward to this one. As Steve said earlier, it's called Rattled Humming Heart. It's being released June 23rd. We're going to keep mentioning that. It's going to be available everywhere, and it's going to be available on limited edition colored vinyl, which will be very nice, CD and streaming, and it's available for pre-order right now, I believe, everywhere, correct?
That's
Yes.
correct. Yeah.
You got okay. So that's fantastic. So congratulations on the second album, finally seeing a release. I know you've probably been highly excited about this thing coming out. So right off the bat, I'm just going to say it, just as Steve did earlier. I absolutely love the new album. It's right up my alley. Anyone who knows me and watches my channel knows what I feel about power pop and just modern rock and roll mixed with that retro sound. I love it. I can't live without it. And personally, I think this could be one of my favorite power pop albums over the last 25 years or so. I think it's that good of an album, and I'm really looking forward to the world getting to hear this thing. Now, let me ask you all a quick question. If you could all take a second or two to answer this. How did each of you get interested in music? Were you raised in musical families? Did any of you have music lessons?
I'll start with that one, I guess. Yeah. So my parents are both musicians. My mom was a professional opera singer when she was in her 20s. So she went to conservatory and did that for a while. That's actually how she met my dad. My dad was also, a lifelong musician. He played classical piano. So music was just kind of ingrained. It was part of our household when I was growing up. So we always had a piano. And then for me personally, as soon as I could, get my hands on an instrument, I did. I started with playing violin. I took, lessons doing that. I did that for like 4 years. And then at a certain point, my mom noticed my interest in it was waning, probably because she was giving me all these, Zeppelin and Hendrix and Who CDs and stuff to check out when I was a kid. And she said, hey, if you keep practicing your violin, I'll get you an electric guitar. And so I did. And then I got the electric guitar, and well, the violin never left the case after that point. So, and I've been, playing and for the most part writing ever since. So that's me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely grew up in a musical household. I mean, music was always being played in the house. Both my parents played instruments, and my dad played guitar. So then, naturally, I think you hit that age right around 12, 13, where you start really getting into music. I don't know why, it just kind of hits you then at some point. And yeah, I just was always a fan. And then I started on bass, really playing bass. No offense to Marley, but I didn't think it was that impressive as a party trick as playing guitar, especially in high school when it came to girls. So then picked up guitar and just started learning some chords, and it kind of just spiraled from there. Joined a few bands, and just yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, Martin mentioned like the Who and Hendrix and stuff like that. I was leaning kind of on like the Who, Petty right behind me there, the Beatles, and another big one of mine was Cheap Trick, which to this day is still my number one.
Around 12 or 13 is when the bug really bit for me. My parents were playing great rock music from the minute I was born. But when it really kind of bit me was around 12 or 13. My father had all of these like concert videos. So my first real immersion in music was watching Concert for Bangladesh and Stop Making Sense with the Talking Heads. And he had a compilation of Springsteen videos that included like this 9-minute version of Rosalita live that I've watched probably 1,000 times. And just having a great time watching all of these great sort of vintage rock and roll videos, The Last Waltz by the band, all of those sorts of things. And that was kind of what was my first obsession with music, I think.
The album retains all the great elements of Red Letter Glow with the new one. I really firmly believe that, but it also takes a big step forward as far as music development. Steve mentioned some of this earlier, different themes, influences, the writing style, diverse sounds. I don't know which one of you'd like to take this, but can you tell us about some of the changes and growth the band made between Red Letter Glow and Rattled Humming Heart?
So, Red Letter Glow really, like when Chris and I met, he had this like back catalog of all these songs. Like you hear like George Harrison, talk about how, when he left the Beatles, he had all this stuff pinned up, and he had a ton of songs. And so Chris I joined as just the guitar player, right? I have written music before for other bands, but I joined this as just a guitar player. And Chris and I there's some stuff on there that like I drove, but most of the songwriting on Red Letter Glow is like Chris kind of had the initial concept, and then we, you know, some of them were more formed, some of them we like baked out together. This was like, I feel like a much different approach where like he came at it with some of the songs that he had written that were like, oh, those are kind of like baked, they're done. I had some stuff that I had written that were kind of like mostly there. And there are like 2 or 3 songs roughly each from both of us on the record. And the rest of them are like, he's got a little bit of something, I've got a little bit of something. And we're doing a lot more like creation of a song as a mixture of our two influences. I think that felt like the biggest difference, at least from a songwriting perspective. And obviously, we the other thing is with you know, with COVID and everything, we had a lot more time to like sit and write, as opposed to like, I think the prior record we did a lot of like writing on the road, if you will, right, where we wrote at practice or on stage and we kind of kick stuff out to see what fit. This was a little more like, well, we can't go play shows, so we spent a lot of our energy like composing. um so kind of a difference in environment. And I don't know, Chris, that kind of feels like the gist of it to an extent.
Yeah. And I think like you kind of hit on it too with the collaboration side of things too. Like you know, what's been nice about the band, and especially when we started getting back in the groove of rehearsing together, you know, we still, like Martin said, we had some songs that were pretty well baked, pretty much ready to go and demoed out. And we would all kind of throw our own flavor in there, even when, you know, something was baked a little bit. But then, you know, there were certain songs that were like totally like, even when we were walking in the studio with Kurt Ryle, it wasn't, they weren't even really, you know, they were barely dough, let alone baked. And you know, it like was nice to have like the other guys chime in a little bit. Like I know, for instance, there's a track on the album called Girl on the Run where we had a intro and a riff and a verse, and that was great. And like we probably ran through about 9 different choruses and just never was really jiving, never really was working. And then like, well, again, what's great about just, you know, being in the band with these guys is we were just kind of sitting there, and I think Marley just literally, you were like, what do we just do? You know, it's funny now, I can't even think of the chords off the top of my head. But you know, like, what if we just do, you know, A, E, D, or whatever it was? And he kind of just, boom, that was the chorus. So I think for a lot of the stuff that was, you know, kind of a mixture of all of us, you know, that was the coolest part about this album, was that, you know, instead of just having this back catalog and Martin adding his flavor here and there, like pulling in the other guys too for their influences and what they were hearing, was kind of a cool experiment this time around.
Marley, I wanted to ask you a question. You came in during the recording process of Red Letter Glow, and now this is your first full-blown album that you've contributed your bass stylings to the band. How did you approach your bass riffs and laying them onto each song? What was your thought with this album?
That's a really good question. So Chris and Martin, who are sort of the primary idea guys when it comes to the songwriting, both kind of have sort of that visionary thing where they can come in and say like, you know, they already kind of have a sense of what the finished product is generally going to sound like, and so they were able to give me lots of, you know, think this band, think this bass player, think this song. Sometimes they had really killer bass parts that just kind of fit really naturally, and we just kind of went with those. For example, the bass line in the chorus of Step is something that Chris actually came up with, and I heard it and I was like, that's it, that's great. Other times it's a little more loose, and I'll kind of play a little bit with what they're bringing in. Julian and I obviously talk about it a lot. You know, are we doing hits here? What's the kick drum pattern here? Am I leaving space for it? Am I locking in with it? You kind of pick those things up from one another as a rhythm section, but it's really, really nice to play with songwriters who have such sort of a clear sense of what they want to hear, and who are good at giving feedback too. You know, there were times where I would come in with a bass part, you know, I would get sent a demo, I would come into rehearsal with a bass part, and we would talk about it and say, that's not really doing it. That's not gonna keep the vibe that we're going for with this song. And then I would go home and come back with another one, and we would work out exactly what was gonna fit well in that track. I think we hit on some pretty good ones together. So, you know, I've played with a lot of different people. It's a real pleasure to play with these guys because they are very good at collaboration and very good at, you know, writing great songs that have space for great bass parts.
You know, this is your second album working with Kurt Ryle from House of Vibe Studios in New Jersey. And could someone tell us a little bit about your relationship with Kurt and why it has worked so well on these first two albums?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of our relationship with Kurt, I was kind of the main connection there. So I actually worked with Kurt. I met him when I was 22. So I've actually known Kurt longer than my wife, which is scary. But I've been working with Kurt for quite a while. He produced an album of a band that I was in, London Egg, actually the same band that Julian Badrino was in, and that's how we met. Really great stuff. I recommend people check out that album. But then yeah, after that band kind of dissolved and Julie and I were trying to get something started again, we had met Martin and started getting the ball rolling of, hey, we need to record something. He was really the only person I could think of that maybe would, you know, be willing to kind of take us on and help us learn and grow and develop a bit. You know, because again, it's not like we were making albums left and right. So we needed someone to kind of guide us a bit and help us out. And Kurt really, you know, polished it up nicely. We gave him the tracks that we had recorded in my parents' living room, which by no means were studio quality, according to Kurt, but, you know, he was able to pull it off and to really polish it up. And then, yeah, I mean, really, Kurt's biggest influence has been, you know, not just musical, but also, I mean, particularly our harmonies and kind of guiding us there, especially in terms of the vocal arrangements and things like that. I mean, Martin, you could probably hit on more what, you know, you and Kurt nerded out in the studio probably more than I did with him sometimes. So you might have a bit more to say about like kind of our chemistry with Kurt for sure.
I think the thing with Kurt is that like I remember I was talking to Marty Scott about, you know, what when people listen to the Midnight Callers, like what is it, right? Like what's the catch? Like every band has a thing that pulls people in. And Marty kind of framed it up as like, you guys have like three things that are like the that I hear as your thing. One is your like huge hooks, right? Two is your guitar riffs. Three is your harmonies. And so one of the things that Marty's kind of been drilling into us, you know, ever since he started to see us play live is like the harmonies have to come through, right? And Kurt is kind of this master of like, we'll usually come into the studio with a song and we've usually got two-part harmonies figured out, right? We know kind of the main line and then the supporting line. And then Kurt will come in and he'll be like, okay, those two are working. Here's 3 and 4, right? And then we're going to cut this one down a little bit, and then we're going to stack a thing on at the end. And so that collaboration with him, the harmonies really take on this life that is what I think what Marty was talking about. You know, and the other main thing that I always think of when we work with Kurt is he pulls great vocal takes out of us. You know, that's the secret sauce of any great producer is someone who's able to hear you speak, hear you sing, hear the way you're executing a line. They're able to hear where you can push your voice, where you can't, where something's going to sound really good. They're going to give you the confidence. They're like a coach, right? They're going to give you the confidence to take something to a level that you would not have been able to take it on your own, or they might push you a little bit further when you may have given up on a day's worth of takes, right? And so that with Kurt and us, that's kind of like that's the best thing you can ask for from a producer. So with the first record, with doing the vocals with Kurt, and then with this record doing the whole thing at his studio, that's really what he's brought to the table. Like we credit him as like the fifth Midnight Caller on the record. Like he really does have that much of a glue to you know, the sound that you hear on the album.
Right.
He was a New York tramp and I love the man, it's true. Well, I don't want you back. If you can tell me what's the good of being want you back, then I can maybe let you back. Cause I'm jacking it so down, it's got me down enough to see that I can't believe the life you made me want enough to. You got another thing coming. You're just a girl on the run. Never gonna tell me that you.
Hey, and speaking of those great vocal harmonies, I just wanted to go over a few of the songs with you real quick, and you can take turns or whatever, giving some thoughts. The first single, which is a digital single, a streaming single, Baby Let Me Be, it's already received some pretty good
What a song.
traction, and it's even shot up. It's gotten up high on the charts at the Radio Indie Alliance. You know, places like that are starting to play it, take note of it. It's starting to get a little attention. Can you tell us a little bit about that song's development, guys, and some of the background on it?
This is a funny one, Chris. I don't know. I feel like you should take it.
Sure. Well, first, I mean, way back, just starting like with demoing and things like that, I had put together just like a demo that was really like slow and dramatic, but it had like a cool like harmony line. And Martin heard it and he was like, that's really nice. This one little bit he liked. And we kind of worked on it a bit together. Marley, I think you were there too, and we were songwriting it together because I think I have like an old demo of us just playing the three of us, but we kind of sped it up a little bit, put a little, kickier beat to it. But it needed something. And so we just kind of like slap different like bits and bobs of things that we already had together. So we had a verse and I just kind of dumped that verse in there. And then we had a chorus and we just kind of threw the chorus in there. And then we had a bridge, let's throw that bridge in there. And it was one of those songs, that came together pretty quick in terms of just collecting all these things together. And I feel like Martin, particularly you, like I remember you turning to me, you're like, I don't know about this one. Like it, I don't trust it. Like it feels like we just kind of slapped it together and like it's something needs to be fixed. And like we did the great test of like bringing the song to our wives, and I think even like your wife was like, no, it's a good song. You're like, I still don't know if it's a good one. And so like
The wife test.
yeah, the wife test. So then we we were going into the studio with Kurt for the initial recording, and we were like, okay, here we're going to do these 4 songs. I forget which ones we cut. We did them 4 on the floor, and so we recorded those songs really quick, and we had like maybe 3-4 extra hours or something in the day. And we kind of turned to each other and said, you know what, well, we should just take that song, Baby Let Me Be, let's just record it here, because Kurt's running the tape, so we have a decent demo of it, so we can just hear what it sounds like, fully flushed out and put together. So we just recorded it, in 2-3 takes or something like that, laid it down. There's scratch vocals on it. And, we told Kurt what was going on. Obviously he was there. And then after we were done, he's like, you don't need to do anything to that. That song's done. And we were like, nah, we'll think about it or something. And he was like, no, like that song's done. Stop overthinking it. And so it really was it's almost like a happy accident. It's even on this album because we thought we just wanted to get like a nice clean recorded demo of it. And that's why we recorded it with Kurt. It had nothing to do with planning to put it on the album. So
Amazing.
Yeah, you can, it's a good segue after your question about Kurt, because he really, like, you can probably single-handedly thank him for this one making it on the record. Because I remember us going into the studio with that same, like, we had a demo, so we were like, what give us your gut on this. And he was like, dude, that's a nugget. Like that's a little power pop snack in the middle of your record. It's got all the things, don't mess with it. And we were like, oh, okay.
I love the entire album. I love Baby Let Me Be, obviously, but one of my favorite tracks on this album is the #1 track. It's the second single on this album. It's called New York Tramp. I'm over the moon with this song, and it's so good. I mean, the whole album could have been picked to be coolest song in the world, but Little Steven has selected New York Tramp as your second coolest song in the world on the Underground Garage Sirius XM. I love it. I mean, first song on the album, as I said, it sets the tone, and we're off and running. We're to the races with this track. Martin, I believe you sing lead on this track. Can you tell us a little bit about this song? I absolutely adore it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's funny that this is like well, for us, it's funny that this is like the lead off single to a certain extent, because we were all like, you go through that process of like, hey, like what's going to be the song that it's going to be put out on Little Stevens. We're like, all right, it's probably going to be like Step or Little Runaround, or one of the ones that's just like an immediate, like, I don't know, it's like a bubblegum earworm type of thing. But now this song came about like this, I had a friend, a close friend from high school who passed away during the pandemic. And I wanted wanted something that was a celebration of his life. Like, he was somebody to me who was just the essence of New York. Like, when I moved here 8, 10 years ago, I forget, actually don't know how long I've been living here now, but um he was just like, he knew all the places to go and hang. He knew all the best dive bars. He knew all the best pool halls, all the best, like, random warehouse parties in Brooklyn, right? He just embodied New York City. And so this was to me, I wanted it to be like a celebration of it. And Marty says, oh, it's like Tramps, right? Like, like the East Village. And like, it's me, it's more like I had this like midnight rambler thing in my head, and a tramp is more this concept of like a rambler, someone always on the move, someone always shaking, right, always going, right? And so that's kind of the subject matter of the song. And we had a couple of variations on it, and then we had a slower one. We actually, one of these days, we'll like dig up the demos and like stitch them together so people can hear the progression. But like, the final version was just like a rhythm change. It was one of those things that you do as a songwriter where it's like, I like this riff, I like generally some of the things that are happening, happening here, and then you make like a single change, and it's like, whoa, okay, there's the song. I changed the tempo, I think, and I like texted Chris a demo of it, and I think it was like kind of like an immediate like, oh yeah, that's where we need to go. And then we kind of shaped it from there.
Yeah, I just love it. It's just a really kick-ass rocker for me. I mean, it's got all the elements I love. Like I said, I want to ask you about a couple more, because I mean, I'm not going to, obviously, time-wise, we can't go through every single song, but there's a couple more I really want to ask you about and get your thoughts on them. The first one is Step. It's another, I keep saying another one of my faves on the album. I love every song on the album. But with Step, I noticed it has that really like syncopated beat, like almost like from when I was a kid. I remember in ELO's Mr. Blue Sky, or Cheap Tricks, I Want You to Want Me. It's got that bop, 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 beat. And you do it so well on this track, and I love it. Just a cool vibe to it. It grabs you. And I'm not a dancer, but Step makes me want to get up and shake my rear end a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit, how did that song originate, and what was the feeling behind going into it? Because it's so uplifting.
That song initially, so I mean, the like lyrical content, I guess you could say, that's kind of been one of those ones that's lingers, so to speak. So I probably wrote that like the first verse and maybe even the second verse like 10 years ago, and it's just kind of been, a phrasing or lyrics that I liked, and you think of a new melody or new chord progression, you slap it in there, and it's not really working, but you like it, so you just keep it around for when the time is right. And it's, yeah, honestly, it's kind of weird. I don't really remember how Step developed to where it's at now. Marley or Martin, if you remember, I think it was one of those ones where, again, just I had the pieces of it. I might have had maybe the initial verse of, the kind of that chugging beat.
I thought you had it like fully baked, man. Like, I was trying to think. I feel like, like we were talking about from the first record, like there were songs that like you just bring in and it's like, well, that's a song. Like, there's nothing that we need to change about. I mean, I think at most we might have added like a guitar solo in there and futzed with a handful of things. But I feel like if I don't know, maybe Marley, you have better recollection than either of us.
I do remember a little bit about the progression of that song, partially because it was one of those things that took my appreciation for Julian's drumming to sort of new heights. I remember sort of messing around in our rehearsal studio with it, playing a few different versions. And, Matt, you were talking about how that sort of like syncopated thing catches you.
Right.
And it's amazing how when Julian really finds what he wants to do, or like really, really locks in with the heart of a song, we all know what to do right away. And so the way he once he found that kind of like syncopated drum thing for the verses into that huge like pre-chorus, it was all sort of, it all fell into place from there. I have like the original demo of it somewhere on my phone. I'm gonna have to look it up and listen to it after this to make sure I'm remembering this all right. But I remember kind of going home from the rehearsal being like, man, I love playing with Julian. This is so great.
Yeah, and I think lyrically, I was just kind of thinking about it too. I think I kind of set out to do, I wanted a song that makes your audience dance So by directly telling them to step and dance, it was kind of the goal there. And then I also like kind of like those, I don't know what you would call it, kind of like those runaway songs, kind of like the, like, I mean, not in any level to this, like the Born to Runs, where, you're telling the girl, let's get out of here and let's run away, and those kind of songs, of jumping in the car kind of thing. So I think I kind of was like leaning into that song genre a little bit of like, I wanted to write a good runaway song that made you want to dance.
Yeah, that's a definitely single potential with that one for sure. I another one I really dig. Little Runaround, catchy as hell. It has a retro feel, but then again with that really modern today sound. How did that one come together, Little Runaround? Because that's a track that it seems like it could appeal to any age category. People that have been, the old time rockers like me and Steve that have been around since the 60s and 70s, or it could appeal to like a new younger crowd too. It's just got a good little groove to it. Tell us about that one.
That one I feel like was one of the tracks that Chris and I like composed in Logic, like almost entirely, like I wouldn't say to completion, but like 90% of the way there. So it was like very much a like, probably like, I think I had that riff, the main riff floating around in my head for a while, like before, like lockdown and all of that. And then it just came about from there. Like originally we had a much different intro, but the hits in terms of the riffs and the verse were there. And then I think the chorus took a little bit longer to like pull together, but like we had, one of the tricky things was like we really liked what we had from like the riff and the verse and like the pre-chorus part. And then there was this kind of like question mark at the pre-chorus. Is like, well, where do you go from here, right? You've already brought it all the way up, and so then that, I think that sparked the idea for us to like bring it back down. So that's what the song does. It basically goes all the way up to a peak, and then it comes back down to just the drums and the vocal hook. And then, it kind of does that up and down thing. And then at the end, we kind of take it up to a big lift at the end. But yeah, I think that was another one of those where we had a lot of ideas and we kind of composed it. We composed it a fair amount. So when we actually were able to play again together as a band, it was like, all right, we're playing that, with maybe like a handful of things left to figure out and some tightening up to do.
Is there a point where, one of you feels extremely strong about something and the other three are saying, well, you know what? I don't think that should go on the album? Or is it pretty democratic? You all have to feel positive about a song for it to make the track list of the album.
I think we're all like friends first, right? Like, so there's a really kind of, there's definitely like this, we have a ton of demos. Like we have a Dropbox folder that probably has 50 or 60 demos in it that are just like Chris walking down the street with his phone, like singing a line into it, or me playing acoustic guitar part. So like there's a ton of other stuff that we decided very intentionally not to continue, like, kind of growing. But I think we have like a pretty good, I feel like Chris and I have a pretty good idea of like the top ones. And then we just, I remember we had a gig where we had like 4 or 5 of them recorded. We're like, all right, we were driving on the way there and we had like, all right, everybody, there's a folder full of demos. Let's go through them and pick the ones that we like. And that's where like the other half of the album came from.
Yeah. I mean, I agreed. I mean, I think like we, little insider stuff. We actually have a lovely folder in our Dropbox labeled shit. That is just, sorry if it's a family show, I apologize, but we have this folder labeled
okay.
shit. And, I think we do a lot of self auditing where all of a sudden you'll see a folder get, a song get dragged into shit and you realize like, all right, that's not worth it. We're just going to, you don't want to get rid of it totally. It's still, you still wish it was a good song, but it just lives in the Dropbox hell of the folder shit. But yeah, I think it kind of goes through these phases. I think like Martin was saying, like, we're pretty good. We put all our demos in these folders. We will move it to shit if it sucks, or, we'll try to grow it as best as we can as individuals and then together. But then there's also then this other level. Sometimes we're just at the end of a rehearsal and it's like, all right, I got a tune. Let's see if we can figure it out. And I know like there's one time where like Martin was sick and we couldn't really work on, rehearsing stuff for shows. So we're like, all right, like Julian, Marley and I just kind of banged out a couple tunes, and that was like the beginnings of I think maybe I got demos and like maybe that was Step, and even Baby Let Me Be might have been floating in there, or at least like a verse line from that. So it goes through these phases of like kind of where we're on our own, then we get together as a duo in terms of Martin and I writing a little bit, and then it goes to the band, it gets filtered there. So and then by the time that we have like fully formed demos, we all are pretty much on the same page of what's gonna make it on the album and what isn't.
No, this is absolutely a great album. I mean, it's all right here, folks. It's all here. You got the rock and roll, the power pop, a bit of glam rock. You got some psych rock, a touch of country pop, as they mentioned with the plan. Yet it's pure Midnight Callers. It's pure today sounding. It's out everywhere June 23rd. It's on pre-order right now. Go to your favorite place, Amazon, Bull Moose, wherever, Barnes and Noble, wherever you want. You can order it online. Again, CD, vinyl. It's going to be streaming. It's everywhere, folks. June 23rd, JEM Records. Guys, anything else we should be aware of with the Midnight Callers, things coming up, shows, events, news?
In terms of shows, I mean, I'm not sure exactly when this is airing, but we're going to be up in the Massachusetts, Boston area in late June. Marley, you'd probably be better to give. Marley is our tour booking guy, so like you go ahead, shoot the dates off, so I don't forget.
Sure. So we're going to be at the C Note in Hull, Massachusetts, on the last Saturday in June, which I believe is the 23rd. No, it's the 24th. I apologize.
Day after the release. Yeah.
Yes, the day after the release. We'll be at the C Note in Hull, Massachusetts. July 22nd, we are in Roscoe, New York. So if you want to come see us in the central New York area, you can come out to Roscoe, New York. Make sure to take a picture of your GPS when you're 41 miles from Roscoe and tag us on social media. That's our favorite joke, and we never get tired of it. And we got some more stuff coming up at the end of August and into early September too. Keep an eye out on our website. We're on Bands in Town. You can see all of our shows there.
So I was gonna say we'd get in trouble with Jonathan Pushkar if we didn't say also if obviously follow us on YouTube. We're always posting videos there, but we're highly active on Instagram. So at the Midnight Callers, if you haven't followed us yet, Facebook, the Midnight Callers, all that good stuff. So give us a follow. It helps us out, and you can keep up to date on all the shenanigans that we're doing in the studio and out in the real world.
Hey guys, the cover of the album, it oozes New York City in my mind. It has that old school vibe to it. And I just want to mention on the album, it says it's done by JMT Design. Beautiful, beautiful cover. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of the cover, the creation of it, and what it symbolizes to you?
Sure. Yeah. So JMT Designs is my friend Jordan Tavener. He's up in Boston, Massachusetts. I've worked with him on prior projects, and he's a super talented graphic designer. Chris and I, like Chris with the first record, like he had this vision of like capturing a scene from what was our kind of essence at the time of like playing East Village bars and that dive bar vibe. And this one was like, we want a continuation of the scene, right? And we worked with Jordan on a couple of different concepts, and this kind of came out, like the idea being like, all right, you're at that bar, and then you're hopping in that cab and you're going to a house party in Brooklyn somewhere for the after party type of thing. And we wanted to capture kind of like the rough and like New York City has this it combines like grit and grime with elegance and glamour. And we wanted to find a way to capture that in some kind of image that gave you told a story without you having to follow a narrative, right? And so I think that Jordan really took that and ran with it. So for us, it's this kind of, I mean, that that one woman on the cover, it's very, she's very elegant and glamorous, and there are these scenes from the city and these party things happening. So that's kind of that felt representative of the music to us and kind of the city we call home. So that's kind of the background on the cover.
Hey guys, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this with us. I know you've had some busy schedule lately with playing gigs and stuff, but and you all have obviously careers and jobs, but we wish you all the best with this brand new album, Rattled Humming Heart. Well-deserved success with it, and I hope continued success going forward in the future. Thank you so much, guys, for being here with us. Steve?
I think it's time to shut things down here. You have been watching the Matt and Steve Show. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate Marley, whatever his last name is. Okay, one more time, Marley.
Mirianthopoulos.
See, I love the name. I just can't say it. And then, of course, Martin and Chris. And, of course, my buddy, my brother, Matthew Street.
Thank you, my friend.
We appreciate everybody for watching. Remember to check out the brand new Midnight Callers album. Check out everything on JEM Records. Fantastic label. This is a brand new classic. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time on the Matt and Steve Show.
Bye,
Goodbye,
everybody.
I am on the brink now, 1 foot forward.